Hey guys, tonight we're gonna wander through a sleepy attic filled with cobwebs, coffee-stained paper, and the kind of secrets that whisper to you when no one else is around. We'll follow the quiet trail of a man who wrote a letter to God, but never sent it. A letter filled with questions, confessions, and that peculiar mix of sorrow and sarcasm only a grandfather could write. You'll walk with me through wood-paneled hallways of memory and crack open stories wrapped in mothballs and cigar smoke. And let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. I mean, it's emotionally lethal. You might leak a nostalgic tear. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment your location and what time it is where you're listening. I'm always curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the top of the attic stairs. The wood under your bare feet is warm and a little sticky. It's summer, and the insulation up here gave up the fight decades ago. The air smells like pencil shavings and lemon furniture polish. One of Grandpa's old radio stations crackles faintly through a dusty transistor tucked between two broken trophies. You only came up here looking for the ceramic turkey that used to sit on the Thanksgiving table. Instead, your eyes land on a cardboard box labeled "Letters Never Sent." The handwriting is definitely his, heavy-handed and tilted slightly left, like it was leaning away from something it didn't want to say. You lift the lid. Inside, a stack of unmailed letters, most addressed to old friends, a few to newspapers, and one, just one, addressed to God. No known address, return to sender? The paper is soft, almost velvety with age, and the ink has faded to the color of weak tea. There's no date, no stamp, no signature. Just that quiet defiance Grandpa always wore like a favorite flannel shirt. You sit down cross-legged on the attic floor, right next to a sagging box of Christmas lights that haven't worked since Y2K. You don't open the letter yet. You just hold it, because you can tell this one's different. And suddenly, you're not just sitting in an attic. You're 10 years old again. It's early morning, the kitchen smells like burnt toast and aftershave, and Grandpa's sitting at the table in his robe, one sock on, one sock forgotten. He's flipping through a battered copy of The Old Man in the Sea and muttering that Hemingway could have used a hug and a thesaurus. That memory is as clear as the attic dust dancing in the light. And as you finally, carefully unfold the letter, the first words send a tiny shiver through your spine. Dear God, I know I haven't written before. Not because I didn't want to, I just wasn't sure where you stood on unsolicited mail. Of course he'd start it like that. Grandpa was the only person you knew who could question divinity and make it sound like small talk over black coffee. As your eyes scan the first few lines, you recognize the rhythm of his voice. The way he put a joke right before something that might make you cry. And nestled right there in the letter's beginning is a story, one you've never heard. Do you remember that Tuesday in '67? I do. I sat in the church parking lot for 22 minutes trying to decide whether to go in or drive home. I was wearing my funeral tie, but it didn't match my mood. And frankly, I didn't want to hear another sermon about Job unless he finally got a vacation. That was so him. But the details were new. A funeral? In 1967? That was 5 years before you were born. And so begins the unraveling. The attic gets warmer, but you don't notice. A little bead of sweat traces down your temple, but you don't wipe it away. You're too deep now. The paper in your hands isn't just a letter. It's a key. Outside, a cicada whines its drawn-out song. Inside, your heart folds quietly in on itself. Grandpa had always hinted at conversations with God, usually with one eyebrow raised and a spoonful of sarcasm, but this letter was something else. It was deliberate, intimate, and unfinished. You scan more lines. I don't need you to fix things. I just want to know if you see me. That would be enough, just to know I'm not typing into a void. There's a pause in the paragraph, an indentation like he stopped, stood up, maybe poured himself another cup of Folgers, black with 2 sugars. Then, also, what's the deal with mosquitoes? Honestly, just explain it to me like I'm 5. You snort, because, yeah. But then comes the sentence that makes your chest tighten. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake not mailing this. But if I did, and you answered, I might not like what you had to say. It ends abruptly, like he dropped the pen and never picked it up again. And just like that, you're wide awake in a sea of memories. Downstairs, the old grandfather clock chimes once. You'd forgotten it even worked. You set the letter down in your lap, tracing your finger over the faded ink. Historians still argue whether Abraham Lincoln actually wrote a letter to his stepbrother that said, "Get a job, stop writing me," or if it was forged decades later. But either way, unsent letters have a weird power. They're time capsules, secrets stored in plain sight. You suddenly remember a fringe tidbit Grandpa once shared, how some 16th century monks believed writing letters to angels was a form of prayer, even if you burned them afterward. Grandpa had probably heard that too. You place the letter back in its envelope, not to hide it, just to give it a home again. And as you head back downstairs, letter in hand, one question drifts with you. Why didn't he send it? That answer's buried deeper, not in the attic, but in you. Section 2. You're in the kitchen now. The letter rests on the table, right where Grandpa used to sit. That same wobbly chair is still there too. Third leg a little short, like it's always about to tap out, but never quite does. The sunlight is coming in sideways through the blinds, slicing the room into golden stripes. You sit in his chair without thinking about it, the wood warm from the summer heat, and suddenly it's like you've time traveled again. You're maybe 8 years old. Your legs dangle off the edge of the seat, and your toes can't touch the floor. Grandpa's beside you, working on his second cup of coffee, steam curling around his face like a sleepy ghost. He's wearing that faded t-shirt with the words, "I survived the Blitzkrieg of '89. No one ever figured out what that meant. And in front of you both, scrambled eggs. Overcooked, rubbery, glued to the plate like regret. Lesson number 1, he said, jabbing his fork dramatically. Never trust a man who over-scrambles his eggs. It means he rushes things. Rushing leads to war. That's how World War I started, probably. You giggled, not because you understood, but because he made history sound like a sitcom written by tired philosophers. Now, years later, you sip your own coffee. No sugar, like he drank it, and wonder how many of those breakfast lessons were real history and how many were Grandpa just riffing. He always told stories with a twinkle in his eye, like he was letting you in on a secret or starting a conspiracy. One morning, you remember, you asked him if God was real, just out of nowhere, between bites of burnt toast. And without missing a beat, he replied, "If he is, I hope he likes eggs." That was it. No sermon, no Bible, just eggs. Historians still argue whether Harry Truman really said the buck stops here because of poker nights with friends, or whether it was actually a phrase invented by his staff to make him sound tough. But Grandpa didn't need a slogan. He had stories and weird metaphors. Like the time he explained morality using a broken lawnmower. It's not about whether it starts, he said, oil on his hands, sweat on his brow. It's about whether you try to fix it or just leave it for someone else to trip over. You didn't fully understand that one until your late 20s, when your own life started sputtering like a flooded Briggs & Stratton engine. Now, flipping through one of his old notebooks, you find a page labeled Questions I Hope I'm Wrong About. There are 12 entries. Number 4, what if God doesn't answer because he already did and we just weren't listening? Number 9, what if my grandkid asks me something I don't know how to answer? You stare at that one for a while. And suddenly, you remember a random fact he once told you, completely out of context. Did you know, he said once, cracking open a beer he wasn't supposed to have, that pigeons were once trained by the U.S. military to guide missiles? Actual feathered guidance systems, war's weird. At the time, you laughed so hard milk came out your nose. But later, Googled it, and yup, Project Pigeon. Totally real. That was his style. Heavy stuff in one hand, absurdity in the other. Which brings you back to the letter. Why write to God if you wasn't sure God existed? Why teach you about honesty and love and patience using metaphors involving overcooked poultry and Cold War trivia? Because Grandpa didn't explain life, he narrated it, and he wanted you to figure it out for yourself. The eggs were just part of the stage design. You reach over and grab the letter again. It feels heavier now, like it absorbs some of the memories still floating in this house. One paragraph jumps out at you. If you're out there, I hope you're paying attention. Not to me necessarily, but to them, the ones who keep waking up even when it hurts, the ones who laugh at bad jokes because silence is worse, the ones who still say thank you even when they're barely holding it together. And just below that, in the margin, faint pencil scratchings. Tell them they matter. You feel something shift, a quiet click inside you, like a drawer that's been stuck for years finally easing open. You think about how many mornings you had with him at that kitchen table, how many times he pretended not to notice when you were sad but slid your favorite jam closer anyway, how he never lectured, just offered weird facts and scrambled eggs. You pick up your phone and Google one more thing, something he once muttered but you never checked. Napoleon was once attacked by a horde of rabbits. And yeah, totally real, a rabbit hunting event gone hilariously wrong. You laugh quietly into your mug, because of course that would be true. Of course Grandpa would leave you with a library of ridiculousness wrapped around quiet wisdom. The kitchen clock ticks once, then again. Out the window. The sky is turning that peachy, sleep-melting shade of early evening. The kind of sky where things feel softer, where letters to God might still be floating somewhere, folded into clouds, postmarked in faith instead of ink. And you think, maybe it doesn't matter if he ever reads it. Maybe writing it was enough. Just like making those eggs. Just like telling you about the missile guiding pigeons and never explaining why. Maybe the answers weren't in the letter. Maybe they were in the mornings. Section 3. You're outside now. The air is thick with midsummer quiet. That gentle hum that settles over the world when nothing urgent needs doing. You walk barefoot across the backyard, toes brushing through overgrown grass. The scent of honeysuckle curling around you like warm breath. And there, just beyond the rusted barbecue and the stack of old paint cans Grandpa swore he'd get to eventually, is the tomato garden, or what's left of it. The rows are faded now. A few stubborn green vines cling to the soil, wrapping around crooked stakes like old memories. You crouch down, brush aside a clump of dry leaves, and there it is, half buried, the tiny wooden sign with Grandpa's handwriting still barely visible. No tomatoes before their time. You smile, because you remember exactly what that meant. You were maybe 11, mid-growth spurt, and catastrophically impatient. You'd asked him for help fixing your broken digital watch, a clunky plastic thing you got free from a cereal box. He examined it for a long time, holding it like it might whisper secrets if he stared hard enough. Then he looked up at you with mock solemnity. I think we're gonna have to bury it. Bury it? You asked, baffled. Yup, he said, already grabbing a little garden spade. Sometimes broken things need time underground. That's how tomatoes do it. That's how your watch will do it. So you buried it, right there next to the beefsteaks and the cherry hybrids. You marked the spot with a plastic fork, because why not? And every week that summer, you checked it, dug it up, inspected it like a tiny archaeologist. It never ticked again, but Grandpa never told you it would. He just wanted to teach you that not everything could be fixed in the moment, that sometimes you had to wait. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra really seduced Julius Caesar by hiding in a rug, or whether that was just theatrical flair added by later writers. But that image stuck around, because we like the drama. Grandpa understood that too. Drama made the lesson stick. So burying a watch in a tomato garden? Classic Grandpa logic. You sit back now, fingers trailing in the dirt. That spot where the watch went in is softer somehow,
like the soil remembers. And for a second, just one breath-long second, you swear you hear him behind you, clearing his throat like he used to when about to drop some unsolicited wisdom. The problem with time, he once said, is that it only makes sense backwards, but you gotta live it forwards. That's the trick. You think again of the letter, of how carefully he folded it, and then you remember the day he taught you how to fold the fitted sheet, or tried to. You were both failing miserably. The sheet kept flopping like a dying jellyfish, and after several increasingly aggressive attempts, he tossed it over his shoulder and declared, "This is why monks took vows of silence. It's the sheets. No one talks about it, but it's the sheets." Random? Sure. Accurate? Disturbingly. You glance up at the house now, at the attic window still cracked open. The breeze carries the scent of old insulation and roses. And then you notice something you hadn't seen before, near the garden's edge, almost hidden beneath the overgrowth. A small wooden box, weathered, nailed shut. You dig around it, heart thudding with that half-kidding, half-serious feeling that you're about to open some buried secret. Inside, a rusted harmonica, a faded Polaroid of a dog you never met, a small notebook labeled "for later, maybe never." The harmonica smells faintly of tobacco. The dog looks like it barked in an old language. The notebook? You flip through it and find tiny sketches, diagrams of pulley systems, and quotes from philosophers, but not the famous ones, obscure ones. One quote stands out. "We bury things not to lose them, but to remember where we left them." You close the notebook. That's when it hits you. The garden wasn't just about tomatoes. It wasn't even just about patience. It was Grandpa's way of teaching you about quiet, about doing things slowly, gently, which might explain why he wrote the letter to God but never mailed it. Maybe writing it was the mailing. He always said God was probably too busy to open envelopes anyway. You lean back, hands behind your head, grass tickling your arms. And that's when a random memory floats in. Something weird he told you once. Did you know the inventor of the Pringles can is buried in a Pringles can? No joke. Part of him anyway. Ashes. Sour cream and onion probably. You'd laughed, certain he was pulling your leg. But he swore it was true. And, of course, it was. Pringles. Patents. Burial. Somehow that memory, the tomato garden, the watch, they all swirl together now. Time, death, and snacks. Grandpa's holy trinity. You look up at the sky, and it's not about answers anymore. It's about remembering the questions he taught you to ask, because some things aren't broken. They're just waiting. Section 4. You're back in the garage now. That slightly spooky cavern of smells, motor oil, pine-scented mousetraps, and whatever ancient chemical stew lives inside paint cans from 1993. You're here because you remembered something. The drawer. It's the one in the old workbench, second from the bottom. The one that never quite closes all the way. It used to be off limits when you were a kid. Too much sharp stuff, Grandpa warned. Which of course made it the most fascinating drawer in the universe. You open it now. No resistance. Just that familiar creak, like the garage is sighing in recognition. Inside, chaos. Loose screws, a half-melted flashlight, several varieties of glue, none of which work, and, sitting right on top, Grandpa's infamous idea book. It's a mess of duct-taped pages, Post-it notes, and napkins with sketches of machines that look part lawnmower, part spaceship. One has a title scrawled across the top, Auto-Retracting Lawn Chair for Emotional Retreats. You laugh, because yes, that's exactly the kind of thing Grandpa would invent after one too many arguments about cable news. Flipping through the pages, you start to notice something strange. Between all the diagrams and scribbles are letters, tiny ones, tucked between margins, written sideways. Notes not addressed to anyone in particular, just thoughts. Maybe the point of life isn't to win, but to keep playing. If I die before figuring out what that creaking noise in the attic is, tell the noise I tried. Note to self, stop buying duct tape, you never use it. And then this one, boxed in red ink. Still not sure if you're real, but if you are, I hope you remember how hard I tried. You sit on the cracked concrete floor,
back against the toolbox, and let the words settle. It's hard to say whether Grandpa was ever truly religious. He was more of a, let's talk to the stars just in case kind of guy. He didn't go to church much, except for weddings and funerals, and even then, he always had a running commentary under his breath. One time, during a cousin's wedding, he leaned over and whispered, "This priest has a good voice, but terrible pacing. I'd fall asleep if I didn't know cake was coming." Historians still argue whether Joan of Arc really heard divine voices or simply followed her gut with unshakable confidence. Either way, people followed her because she believed. And that's what Grandpa did. He believed in duct tape, in terrible harmonica music, in burying broken watches and pretending it helped. And maybe in something more. You notice a loose page fluttering under the bench. Pull it out. It's not a blueprint this time. It's a letter. Half written. No envelope. Dear you, I don't know how prayer works, or if it does, but today my grandson asked me if the stars could hear us. I said yes. I hope I wasn't lying. I've lied before, small lies mostly, about where cookies went, about how car engines really work, but this felt different. I want him to believe something big listens when we're small. You pause. He never showed this to you, never even hinted at it. But now, years later, you realize he did show you, just not with words. He showed you in the way he watched thunderstorms, silence, and reverence. In the way he insisted on saying goodnight to the moon like it was a family member. In the way he always left one light on, just in case someone out there needs a sign. He was a quiet believer in invisible things, not in a churchy way, in a duct-taped, homegrown, grilled cheese for dinner kind of way. And suddenly, another weird fact he told you comes rushing back. Did you know, he said once while digging through this very drawer, that ancient Romans used crushed mouse brains as toothpaste? You gagged, he grinned, and you complain about mint flavor. Gratitude, kid. That was his thing, hiding wisdom inside horror, laughter inside disgust. You close the idea book and run your fingers across the cover. The duct tape is starting to peel, revealing old layers beneath, sticky ghosts of past fixes. And you think, maybe faith is like this book, messy, rewritten, stuffed with contradictions. Not pristine, not framed, just used, and still, it holds together. You stand up, brushing off your jeans, and take one last look around the garage. The dust dances in a shaft of light coming through the window. Something about that light feels almost sacred, like it passed through time to find you. And maybe, just maybe, Grandpa was right. Someone or something is always listening. Even if it's just the echoes of a man whispering his hopes into a notebook in a garage that smells like WD-40 and dreams. Section 5. You're back inside now, upstairs in the study. That cramped, dusty room with the squeaky floorboard that always gave away your attempts to sneak candy from Grandpa's desk drawer. You know the one. It creaks like it's warning the house. They're back, and they're looking for caramels. This room hasn't changed much. Same leaning bookshelf, so overloaded it's basically performing a long, slow trust fall into the wall. Same ashtray, long unused, still holding a paperclip chain and a button from someone's long-lost coat. And the desk, that old, blocky thing that looks like it was carved from a single grumpy tree. You sit down, feeling the seat cushion sigh under you. The letter is here too. Not the one you found in the kitchen, but another. This one tucked in an envelope, yellowing, with no address. Just a post-it stuck to the front. Too honest, never mail.
Classic Grandpa. You open it. Inside, the writing is tighter, more urgent, like it's spilled out in one sitting. Dear God, or whatever name you go by, I'm writing this because I've got questions and Google's not helping. When you made people, did you mean for knees to hurt this much after age 60? Also, why do we forget people's faces but remember their laugh, or the way they said our name when they were mad, or how they smelled like sawdust and peppermints? If this is some kind of cosmic memory design, it's either brilliant or very messed up. You pause and smile. Because of course. Grandpa approached spirituality the way some people approach IKEA furniture, skeptically, with a hammer in hand. He was never one to quote scripture, but he did once recite an entire Seinfeld monologue about soup with tears in his eyes. So, basically the same thing. You keep reading. There are days I think you must be real. Like when my grandson looked at me and said, "Do dogs go to heaven or do they just wait in the yard?" And other days I wonder if we all just made you up because we're terrified of silence. But here's the thing. I talk to you anyway. Not because I'm sure you're there, but because it helps. It helps. Your throat tightens. Because there it is. The sentence. The hidden thesis of his whole life. It helps. No grand proclamations, no spiritual branding, just something that made the ache quieter. Historians still argue whether Einstein believed in God or whether he was just poetic about the universe. He said, God does not play dice with the universe.
I do not believe in a personal God. Ambiguous? Sure, but beautifully so. Grandpa would have liked that. He didn't trust certainty. Said it made people smug. Told you once that anyone who's completely sure of anything should probably take a nap and start over. And yet, he kept writing letters like this one. You glance over at the windowsill, where a tiny ceramic angel still sits, one wing chipped off. He called it the budget seraph. Claimed he got it in a flea market run by heavily tattooed nuns in Reno. You never fact-checked that. Probably best. You open the bottom drawer of the desk and pull out a bundle wrapped in an old dish towel. Inside, a yo-yo with a cracked axle, a pocket knife with no blade, a cassette tape labeled Whisper Ideas, and a Polaroid photo of Grandpa holding a goat wearing sunglasses? No explanation. None needed. That was him. Absurdity tucked gently between the pages of everything serious. You pop the cassette into the old player still plugged in nearby. There's static, then his voice. If anyone's listening to this, I want you to know, I once tried to build a time machine out of a dishwasher and a coat hanger. Didn't work, but I did end up with the cleanest socks in 3 counties. You laugh, out loud, alone in a dusty room, and somehow it's exactly what you needed. The tape continues. I know I've left a lot of junk behind. But if you're going through it, I hope you find the good parts. And if you find this letter to God, don't read it for answers. Read it for comfort. I didn't send it because it wasn't meant for him. It was meant for me. Maybe for you too. You hit pause, and everything is quiet, except the soft hum of the old desk lamp. There's something powerful about that he wrote to someone he wasn't sure existed, said, the letter helped him, and then left it behind for you, to find, to read, to feel less alone on the days when silence gets too loud. Remember when he told you that platypuses are venomous? And you said, that's not true, you made that up. And then you Googled it, and yeah, true. The platypus, one of evolution's weirdest curveballs, also has spurs that deliver venom. Just like some people, he said, weird and dangerous if you touch their feet. What did it mean? Who knows, but it stayed with you, like this letter will. You fold it back up, slide it into the envelope, and place it carefully in the desk drawer. Not to forget, to remember where you left it, just in case someone else comes looking for comfort. Section 6. You're sitting on the front porch now, late afternoon sun warming the cracked pane of the railing. Your elbows resting where Grandpa's used to. That spot still has the faint groove from his favorite mug, the one with the cartoon possum that read, "Playing dead until further notice."
He got it at a yard sale, paid $1/4 for it, and claimed it was the best investment he ever made. You remember watching him sit here, same exact spot, sipping coffee that was more sugar than bean, watching the world like it was a slow-burn movie with no climax. "Life's mostly B-roll," he said once. "You don't realize the good stuff until it's already rolled past." He wasn't wrong. And now, as you sit here with the ghost of his mug beside you, you flip through the notebook you found buried in the tomato garden. For later. Maybe never. The sketches are even stranger in daylight. One page shows a squirrel-sized treadmill labeled Wildlife Fitness Initiative. Another features what appears to be a flying umbrella with annotations like wind-powered regrets and could double as funeral hat. But scattered between the jokes and drawings are thoughts, fragmented but clear. If I get to meet you, I'll ask why joy always feels like it might vanish, like it knows it doesn't belong. Maybe faith is just bravery in slow motion. You close the notebook gently. Something about this porch made Grandpa philosophical. It was his chapel. Once, when you were 14 and convinced the world hated you, you sat out here in a hormonal storm cloud. Grandpa joined you, didn't say a word for 10 whole minutes. Then he asked, "You ever notice that clouds never apologize for showing up?" You stared at him like he'd finally cracked, but he just shrugged and said, "Maybe we're all just passing weather." Historians still argue whether Viking berserkers really consumed hallucinogenic mushrooms before battle, or whether that's just a myth inflated by terrified monks. Either way, they were terrifying. And sweaty, very sweaty. Grandpa would have loved that detail. Said people forget to factor in sweat when imagining warriors. Everyone thinks glory smells like fire and steel. It doesn't. It smells like armpits and fear. He had a way of humanizing the legendary. Maybe that's why you keep coming back to the idea of his unsent letter to God. Not because it's profound necessarily, but because it's human. And now that you've seen the note in the notebook, heard the voice on the tape, read the one he marked too honest, you realize something. There were drafts. He'd been writing that letter his whole life, in little pieces, in strange metaphors, in the way he once taped a photo of the moon to the inside of the fridge so it never got lonely, in how he kept Band-Aids in every room, even taped under tables, because pain never calls ahead. You look out now at the street, same cracked sidewalk, same nosy neighbor peeking through the blinds across the way, Mrs. Halberd, who once accused Grandpa of growing illegal zucchini because they were suspiciously large. He told her they were genetically optimistic. You laugh, remembering how he sent her an anonymous Valentine's Day card every year, signed from the Vegetable Mafia. Even his jokes were letters. Letters to people, to time, to the universe. He was writing something every time he made someone laugh or paused before answering a question he didn't fully understand. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the letter to God was never about getting a reply. Maybe it was about leaving evidence that he tried, that he wondered, that he dared to put his questions into words and send them out into the great maybe. You reach into your jacket pocket and pull out the tiny harmonica from the box you found. You press it to your lips and blow a soft, wheezy note that sounds somewhere between a funeral and a squeaky toy. He would have called it music for ghosts, and then told you the world's quietest joke. Did you know Napoleon was once attacked by a horde of bunnies? You blinked. That's not true. Swear on my last toaster strudel, he'd said. You Googled it. Eventually, because back then you were skeptical of everything except aliens and pizza bagels. Turns out, mostly true. Napoleon arranged a rabbit hunt. The organizers brought hundreds of tame rabbits. The rabbits, assuming they were being fed, charged him en masse. He fled. A man who conquered half of Europe, undone by fluffy optimism. You sit with that for a moment, and it hits you? Maybe Grandpa saw the divine not in cathedrals or sermons, but in that moment, in bunny ambushes, in angry zucchini, in porch-light philosophy. He didn't need certainty. He just needed wonder. And now you do too. You put the harmonica away, gently, like it's sacred, because in its own squeaky way, it is a reminder, a relic, a line and the lifelong letter Grandpa wrote every time he paid attention, the letter he never sent, because maybe, in his heart, he believed the universe had already read it. You're in the attic now. Yes, that attic. The one Grandpa swore was haunted by a friendly ghost who just hates clutter. It smells like dust and time, like old sweaters, crumbling insulation, and secrets packed in boxes labeled things like junk but sentimental and definitely not haunted. Your flashlight beam slices through the dim, stirring up a slow-motion ballet of floating particles. The floor creaks under your every step like it's judging your weight, your life choices, or both. You make your way to the far corner, the one beneath the slanted roof where you used to hide during hide and seek. No one ever looked there because it required crawling under a low beam marked with yellow tape and the words, "Brain, Danger Zone." Classic Grandpa. You duck under, squeeze past an old rocking horse that looks like it knows too much, and there it is, the trunk, the one with the sticker that says, "Top Secret, open only during existential crises." You pop it open. Inside, a blanket that still smells faintly of cinnamon and wet dog. A VHS tape labeled, "Do not watch unless extremely bored or recently heartbroken." A leather-bound journal wrapped in twine. And a stack of letters, rubber-banded together, marked "Not for mail, for the moon." You start with the journal. The handwriting is older, shakier. It must have been one of his last notebooks. The pages are filled with lists. Strange, beautiful, wildly impractical lists. Things I wanted to be. A lighthouse keeper. A man who knew how to fold fitted sheets. A person who laughs at bad weather instead of checking the forecast 11 times. You flip a few pages. Things I still don't understand. Taxes. People who clap when airplanes land. Whether dreams are messages or just brain lint. Why I keep writing to you, God, like I'm expecting a return address. That last one lands with a thud. You remember how, even in his most absurd moments, Grandpa always had one foot in the profound. He once told you that Plato believed souls remembered truth from a previous existence, that learning was just recollection, which explains why babies stare at ceiling fans like they're remembering ancient prophecies. Historians still argue whether Plato actually meant that literally or metaphorically, but Grandpa never cared. All philosophy is just highly organized confusion, he said, but sometimes the confusion is beautiful. You smile, running your hand along the spine of the journal. He wasn't trying to teach you anything, really. He just wanted you to see the world the way he did, ridiculous and miraculous in equal measure. You pull out the letters marked "For the Moon." They're folded neatly, each starting with "Dear You" and ending with "Thanks for listening," even if you're just rocking dust. One reads, "Tonight I watched my grandson learn how to skip stones. He got frustrated after 5 tries. I told him the water isn't counting, and he smiled like that changed something. Maybe it did. Maybe that's faith, smiling into silence and skipping another stone." Another, "Some days I think about my own funeral. I hope someone tells a joke, something dumb, something I would have liked, like how wombats poop cubes. You know that one. It's true. Don't let preacher miss that detail. You didn't. You remember now. You did mention it. At his memorial." Between readings and polite sniffles, you stood up and said, "Grandpa wanted us to know something important. Wombats poop cubes." And through the chuckles and eye rolls, something broke open, a little space for joy inside the grief. That was his real letter, that moment, that cube of laughter and a rectangular room filled with loss. You put the letters back gently, fold the blanket, careful not to disturb the smell. Then, despite yourself, you pop in the VHS. The screen flickers, then stabilizes. There he is, Grandpa, sitting in his favorite recliner, wearing sunglasses and a Santa hat, holding a ukulele he absolutely did not know how to play. "Hey, kid," he says, eyes twinkling. "If you're watching this, I'm probably busy haunting the attic. Don't worry, friendly ghost. Might reorganize your socks, maybe write spooky notes in your cereal. He strums a single, terrible chord. Here's the thing. I didn't send that letter to God, not because I chickened out, not because I didn't believe, but because I think letters to the divine are more about what we need to say than what we hope to hear back. And guess what? That means you can write your own, anytime. Doesn't matter if you believe, doesn't matter if you're mad. Just write it. Write it when you're lost, when you're tired, when you're holding grief like it's a pet you never asked for. He pauses, looks right into the camera. Write it for you. That's what I did, every time. The screen fizzles to static. You sit in silence, the hum of the old TV filling the attic like a lullaby. And just before you turn it off, you hear it, a soft thump. From above, the roof creaks. You smile. Maybe it's the house settling. Maybe it's the ghost
reorganizing socks. Or maybe, just maybe, the moon answered. The night settles around you like a weighted blanket, thick, warm, and just a little too nostalgic. You're back in Grandpa's workshop now. The smell hits you first. That blend of sawdust, oil, and the faint whiff of burnt toast from the time he tried to invent a 3-second grilled cheese press. Spoiler, it just lit things on fire. The workbench is exactly as he left it. Tools lined up not by size or type, but by some esoteric vibe-based system only he understood. A hammer beside a tiny paintbrush, a tape measure next to a rubber chicken. Chaos, genius, Grandpa. You run your hand across the scarred surface of the bench. Each dent is a memory, a failed project, a victorious fix, a wild idea born at 2 a.m. under the influence of peppermint schnapps and reruns of Mythbusters. Pinned to the corkboard above the bench is a faded index card that reads, Rules of the Workshop. Mistakes are mandatory. Safety goggles make you look cool. Everything is fixable, except bad vibes. Don't ask if it'll work. Try it and find out. If it breaks, laugh before you cry. You stare at that last one longer than you mean to, because it's not just about tools, is it? Grandpa's workshop was never about woodworking or mechanics. It was about the quiet rebellion of trying anyway, the stubborn joy of creation for creation's sake. Historians still argue whether Leonardo da Vinci actually built some of the machines he drew, flying machines, scuba suits, early versions of tanks, or if they were just theoretical. But either way, he dreamed them. Grandpa called that kind of dreaming blueprint therapy. And his own machines? Oh, you remember. The garden weasel that doubled as a salsa spinner. The lawn chair modified to roll away political conversations. The umbrella that deployed confetti when opened. That one actually worked, once. And then there was the mailbox. You spot it now, resting in the corner, dented, spray-painted with glitter, and mounted on a skateboard wheelbase. You roll it over to the workbench and open the little door. Inside is a single envelope. It's unsealed, addressed in that sharp, looping script you know by heart. To the one who keeps finding me, aka you. Your fingers hesitate. You take a breath and slide the letter out. Hey, you found the final one. Well, maybe not final. Who knows what else I've stashed around here. But this one's important. If I never sent my letter to God, maybe it's because I knew someone else would find it when they needed it. Someone like you. I know life's heavy sometimes. Grief's a weird beast. It doesn't bark. It just shows up and lies down across your chest. But listen, if you're reading this, you're still here. Still building, still wondering. You don't have to believe in anything big and shiny and certain. Just believe in small things. Believe in pancakes, in early mornings when nobody's talking, in dogs who seem to know when you're sad, in the fact that sea cucumbers can literally puke out their intestines as a defense mechanism and still survive. Yes, really, look it up. The world is strange and sad and hilarious. I hope you stay strange enough to notice. Keep writing, keep asking questions, keep fixing the things you can, and laughing at the rest. And hey, if you ever do send a letter to God, don't worry about postage.
I think we're all connected by some cosmic Wi-Fi anyway. With love from every unfinished project, Grandpa. You sit with that for a while. Letter open, tools around you, the hum of night outside the work. Window, like the background track to an old home movie. It hits you then, quietly but completely. Grandpa was building something. Not machines, not jokes, not just a legacy. He was building you, one story at a time, one ridiculous invention, one crumpled note, one unsent letter after another. And now, here you are, writing your own version of it all, just by remembering. You glance at the corkboard again. The rules. They were always for you. Especially rule number 5. So you laugh. Not a loud one, just enough to feel it lift something heavy off your chest. Then you reach under the bench and pull out a dusty spiral notebook, the kind Grandpa used to sketch in, and a pencil that's been chewed down to a nub. You flip to a fresh page. You write, "Dear whoever's listening," and you smile, because suddenly the workshop doesn't feel empty. It feels ready. You're in the backyard again. It's late now, closer to midnight than not. The stars are out, crowding the sky like they're nosy neighbors eavesdropping on your thoughts. A light breeze rustles the tomato vines, which are still hanging on, stubborn as ever. You wander past the garden bed where you found the notebook, your steps soft on the dew-damp grass. That little metal box is still there, half buried like a time capsule, left by someone who wasn't quite ready to say goodbye. The lid is back in place, but you can't help reaching down, pressing your palm against the cool metal. You whisper, "Still here," like maybe the garden can hear you. Maybe it can. The moon's watching, big and indifferent. Or maybe not so indifferent. You can never really tell with the moon. It's got that whole mysterious, emotionally distant vibe. You lie down on the grass, arms stretched out beside you, looking up like you used to as a kid, when Grandpa would. "There's refrigeratorus," he'd say, tracing a crooked line of stars, "named for the ancient god of midnight snacks." You once corrected him, actually said, "That's not real." He pretended to be deeply wounded and didn't speak to you until you gave him half your pudding cup. Emotional blackmail via celestial storytelling. But now you get it. Naming the stars wasn't about facts. It was about ownership, connection, like leaving fingerprints on the cosmos just to say, "I was here." Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptians aligned the pyramids to the stars of Orion's belt intentionally, or if it's a cosmic coincidence. But Grandpa always believed the universe was full of secret nudges, winks from something bigger than us. Nothing's random, he said, not if it means something to you. You reach into your pocket and pull out one of Grandpa's old letters, not one of the ones for God. This one's addressed to a fictional cowboy named Sheriff Nostalgia. But you read it anyway because, well, who wouldn't? Dear Sheriff Nostalgia, it's me again. I've been thinking about the days when I believed I'd live forever. Not in the literal sense, though I once tried to patent an immortality smoothie. Spoiler, it was just root beer and kale. No, I mean the way you feel invincible when you're young, when your knees still work and your questions haven't turned into regrets. But aging, it's not just falling apart, it's unfolding, like origami in reverse. You get to see what was hidden inside all along. If I disappear before I figure it all out, I hope someone picks up the trail, follows the breadcrumbs. P.S. Tell the tumbleweeds I said hi. You fold it back slowly, like tucking in. He wanted to be found. That much is clear now. And you're realizing something else. Maybe the unsent letter to God wasn't one letter at all. Maybe it was every letter, every joke, every list, every odd little object he kept that seemed like junk but was actually code. A message not for heaven, but for you. for anyone brave enough to look. You remember the box in the hallway closet labeled Emergency Whimsy? Inside were googly eyes, a slinky, a kazoo, and a note that read, "Apply liberally to reality when it gets too serious." You always thought it was just Grandpa being Grandpa, but now you see it. That was a form of prayer. So was the time he painted smiley faces on all the fence posts. And when he organized the neighborhood scavenger hunt with clues that made no sense unless you'd read Winnie the Pooh and listened to at least one Bob Dylan album backward. Even his ridiculous philosophy hat, a trucker cap with a plastic brain glued on top, was its own kind of sacred vestment. He once wore it to your middle school graduation and yelled, "Cogito ergo yo" from the bleachers. Mortifying at the time, legendary now. And that's the thing about legends. They grow in the retelling. They stretch. They shimmer. They become something more than truth. They become memories soaked in magic. You lie there under the sky, letting that thought settle in, letting it soften your breath, letting it loosen your grip. And then, because it feels right, you pull the small notepad from your pocket, the one you started earlier. You write, "Dear whoever's still listening, you were right about all of it. The laughter, the questions, the way love doesn't leave. It just changes shape. I'm not looking for answers anymore. Just companions, just echoes, just someone else who'll name the stars after you."
Appliances and dance barefoot in the tomato patch like it's a sacred ritual. I'm going to keep writing and watching and folding myself open like a well-worn map. Hope that's enough. Yours in stardust, me. You set the notebook beside you in the grass, let the pages ripple in the wind. You're not worried it'll blow away. If it does, maybe that's just how the next person finds it. Because letters don't always need a mailbox. Sometimes they just need release. And tonight, you finally feel ready to let go of the ache, of the wondering, of the unsentness. Because you've seen it now, how every silly, brilliant, deeply human thing Grandpa did was part of the same story. One big, sprawling, laugh-out-loud, deeply sincere whisper into the unknown. The letter wasn't lost. It was delivered, right on time. You're not exactly sure when your eyes closed, maybe somewhere between the second star and the end of that last sentence in your notebook. But now the world is a little quieter, and your breath comes a little slower. You're still lying there in the backyard, dew soaking into your shirt, notebook curled beside you like a sleeping cat. And for once, you don't feel the need to move. Because something has settled. Not resolved exactly. Life doesn't wrap itself in neat bows like that. But softened, like a knot that's loosened just enough to breathe. The sky hasn't changed much. The constellations, both real and Grandpa named, still float up there. But they feel closer somehow. Less like cold astronomy, more like old friends waving from the windows of a train you didn't know you were waiting for. You hear the faint creak of the screen door behind you. Not in reality maybe, but in memory, in muscle. Grandpa's boots on the porch, that gentle thud as he settles into his lawn chair. He probably got that mug, the one that says "World's Okayest Grandpa." He's probably humming something tuneless, fingers drumming a rhythm known only to retired mischief makers. You don't look, you don't need to, because that's not really how memories work. They don't require eyes, just trust. So you speak without sound. Thanks for the letters, all of them. And in your chest, something warm flickers on like a pilot light. You think about all the little altars he left behind. The journal in the attic, the rule board in the workshop, the confetti umbrella, the mailbox on wheels, the tomato garden that refused to quit, the whispered advice folded between dad jokes and conspiracy theories about squirrels running the stock market. Each one a line in his grand unsent letter. And you were always meant to find them, to pick up where he left off. Not to finish it, because letters to God or to the universe or to some kid staring at the stars 50 years from now, they're never really finished. They just pass hands. And now the ink is in yours.
Historians still argue whether oral storytelling was born from necessity or comfort, whether it was survival or ceremony. But Grandpa would have said, it doesn't matter. People just want to feel less alone when the fire's dying down. So here you are, fire dying down, and still warm. Maybe tomorrow you'll write another letter, or paint eyes on the mailbox again, or teach your niece to skip stones and tell her the water doesn't care how many times she fails. Maybe you'll send that letter to God, not because you need an answer, but because the act of writing it is the point. Or maybe you'll fold it into a paper plane and let the wind decide, because you finally understand. The letter Grandpa wrote to God, the one he never sent, wasn't for you.
God at all. It was for you, and for the version of you who'll write your own someday. Wind down, 300 words. So now, loosen your grip a little. Let your jaw unclench. You've held a lot today, and you've done it well. There's no test at the end of this. No final exam in memory or grief or figuring out why people put googly eyes on everything and call it healing. You've walked through rooms filled with dust and laughter, touched letters sealed in silence, listened to ghosts that didn't rattle chains but rearranged the furniture of your heart. You're allowed to let it go now. Let your breath get slower, softer, like you're settling into the shape of yourself after a long, weird dream. Let the grass cradle you. Let the stars blink slowly above you like they're in on the joke. Let Grandpa's voice echo, not in your ears, but somewhere just behind your smile. You've done enough. You've remembered enough. The letter's been read. The answer? It was always this. You're still here, still wondering, still open, still you. So close your eyes. Maybe dream of confetti umbrellas and cosmic Wi-Fi. Maybe imagine him waving from some porch in the sky, where all the weirdos and wisdom keepers go when they've said what needed saying. And if you wake up tomorrow with a strange idea and a need to write it down, do it. That's how the next letter begins. Sweet dreams.